person expressed concern at the government's inaction, highlighting the attack in the southern state of Enugu, Nigeria, where 500 armed men killed 40 people and set many houses and a church on fire. The Nigerian government at the time promised they would take action, and this was in 2016. Now in 2018, the Armed Conflict Location and Event Data Project reported how Fulani militants constituted the deadliest threat to civilians in Nigeria, killing over 1,000 civilians in 2018. And we were organizing this event, our Jubilee Campaign USA, and Save the Persecuted Christians, and the Institute on Religion and Democracy, and the International Committee on Nigeria. And as you know, Jubilee Campaign works for religious freedom, and also to be a vital voice for those suffering in silence, and working to set free prisoners of conscience. And with us today, we have former Congressman Frank Wolf. We're very happy to have you here. Congressman Frank Wolf is a former representative of Virginia's 10th District, a position he served from 1918 to 2014. And in the past, he's for a long time. And throughout his career, Congressman Wolf has been an advocate for human rights, speaking up for those who cannot speak up for themselves. He's spoken out against abuses in China, in Iran, and working to end human trafficking. He's the former co-chair of the Tom Lantos Human Rights Commission and the former chairman of the Commerce, Justice, Science, and Related Agencies subcommittee of the U.S. House Appropriations Committee. And he's also led fact-finding trips, more recently in Nigeria. So we're very happy to have you here, and honored, and welcome. You have to take the floor. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll be relatively brief, but I'll start out with the premise that I'm going to make is until you can make the case that this is genocide, I think this will not get the traction. With regard to the issue of genocide in Iraq, until we were able to convince the world, including our own government, that it was genocide, and how we did it is another story, there was no traction. So it is important, and the title of this gathering is dealing with genocide is very, very important. One, Nigeria is the largest country in Africa, over roughly 198 to 200 million people. It will be larger than the United States in the year 2050. The Global Terrorism Index says it is the third most dangerous country in the world. First, Afghanistan, second, Iraq, and third is Nigeria. The three groups that are particularly dangerous, one, Boko Haram, you all know this, it's a very sophisticated audience, you know. Secondly, the Fulani militants, and then ISIS from West Africa. Thousands, as you know, have been killed, churches have been burned, and Greg Stanton with Genocide Watch has said with regard to Boko Haram, the activities are genocide. Now, Greg is a scholar. He wouldn't say these things if it were not factual accurate. It is genocide. With regard to the Fulani militants, he said it basically is crimes against humanity, and if you had to give it a name, you could say it is genocidal. So we clearly have the word genocide for Boko Haram, and genocidal, at least, for the Fulani militants. You know, there's hunger, there's sexual trafficking. In Italy alone, right now, there are roughly 15,000 Nigerian women and girls being sexually trafficked. Corruption, you know, there are 5 to 6, some say more than that, million refugees, IDPs, very difficult time. The world has really pretty much forgotten about Nigeria. 5 years ago, April, when the Chibok girls were kidnapped, the 200 and some from the town of Chibok, the world was up in arms. President Obama and many other world leaders, good people, Prime Minister Cameron, all did hashtag bring back our girls. I mean, it was all over. And when I spoke to one of the mothers when we were up in the region. They said they were very excited and very hopeful to see that the world was finally focusing. Well, this past April, it was 5 years. I checked it in many of the media. I saw no one did hashtag bring back the girls. The girls have basically, I'm sorry to say, have been forgotten, yet just under 50% are still there. And when we spoke to one of the counselors, what he told us was so brutal. I'm not going to go into it with regard to the fate of it. We see the same thing with regard to Leah. I know, say the Persecuted Church brought Leah's mother here several weeks ago. Leah was a 14-year-old girl who would not deny her faith. You know, in the Bible, Peter denied Jesus 3 different times. Here's a 14-year-old girl who would not deny her faith. What I believe is almost a parallel. It took the world so long to deal with the issue of genocide in Rwanda. I went to Rwanda shortly thereafter. The genocide and bodies were floating down the rivers, and the stories were atrocious. The world, literally, there were cables. If you read Samantha Power's book, Problems from Hell, there were cables coming into the State Department. The Secretary of State's office knew what was taking place, as we now know what is taking place. The UN, Kofi Annan, knew what was taking place, and they would not do anything. Bill Clinton, to his credit, felt so guilty. If you recall, if you're old enough to recall the end of the Clinton administration, he felt so guilty. He flew to Rwanda, and there's film clips of this, and literally apologized. Here's what Bill Clinton said. He said, the international community, together with nations in Africa, must bear its responsibility for this tragedy. He said, we did not act quickly enough after the killing began. He said, we did not immediately call these crimes by their rightful name, genocide. We are facing exactly that situation at this very moment. So I think there's two things that has to be one. One, you need a legal brief. You need someone, because when we did the genocide in Iraq and in the Plains, we had some prominent law firms do a brief to basically conclusively prove, so that the world could not deny it, that this was genocide. You literally need to do the same thing. There needs to be a document clearly stating it, because the world will feel the same way that, to his credit, Bill Clinton felt guilty for not having that. Secondly, you need to wake up the faith community. There are so many passages in the Bible with regard to that the church ought to be involved, and yet the church, to a large degree, all of the denominations, many of the prominent names you can recite, have really been silent on this issue. Thirdly, I think we need a special envoy for Nigeria and the Lake Chad region, because Cameroon, Niger, Chad, so goes Nigeria, so goes all of these other nations. Lastly, the Irish singer Bono said that if Nigeria implodes, as many people believe that it will, or is in the process of doing, it'll be an existential threat to Europe and to other parts of the world. If you've been to Europe lately, many European countries, Germany in particular, has not been able to handle the refugees, over 1 million coming out of Syria and coming out of Iraq. 1 million will be so low. Every time you see a story of a boat and drowning, there are people that are leaving, usually 10 to 15% are from Nigeria. If this country implodes, I think the impact on Europe and even on the United States will be an existential threat, as Bono said. So you need to make the case on genocide over and over, and sometimes you have to say it 10 times, 20 times before it takes, so the world will feel guilty that they feel it. We have a museum here in town. Never again, and for the world to have missed Rwanda in Africa, for the world to have missed Darfur in Africa, to turn around again and to miss it here would be unacceptable. So that's what I think you need. Genocide, genocide, genocide. You need to have a legal brief clearly stating that it is genocide, so people cannot say, no, it really is farmer herdsmen, it's really this and that. Secondly, you need to wake up the church here in the United States, so they will begin to advocate the same way. I give a lot of credit. The Knights of Columbus and many of the other groups, Franklin Graham group, many of the groups, they advocated for the Christians and the Yazidis who were facing genocide and had faced genocide. And the fact that Franklin Graham and the Knights of Columbus, I congratulate both of them. They were willing to embrace and get involved, and many other leaders that literally changed the dynamics. Had this administration not changed the policy in northern Iraq, in the Nineveh Plains area, we would have literally seen the end of Christianity and the cradle of Christendom. More biblical activity took place in Iraq than any other country of the world other than Israel. Abraham, Nasariah, in the Bible, Daniel. And so the fact that this administration changed the policy because of the good work, and I give a lot of credit to the Vice President and the Vice President's staff of the White House, but also to Franklin Graham and to the Knights of Columbus and many of the faith groups. You need to model that and do that with regard to Nigeria, and you ought to do it quick, because if this thing does unravel, thousands more will die.
Thank you very much, Congressman Wolf. And our next speaker is Honorary Terwase Orbunde. He's the former Nigerian congressman and now chief of staff of to the governor of Benue State. And he's taking the pains to travel here, so thank you. And he graduated from the University of Jos in the Plateau State, where he obtained a degree in architecture in 1986. He has been the chief legislative aide and later advisor to the former Senate President, Senator Pius Amin, between 2000 and 2003. We're very happy to have him here. Welcome.
Good afternoon, and my boss. Thank you for this opportunity to share a few thoughts with you. First of all, I wouldn't want to go the way that the Wolf went. He's very informed, and I want to just adopt what he said. But let me say that as we talk, attacks could as well be going on in Nigeria. What are the targets of the attacks? Farmers, most of who are Christians, churches, medical facilities, and the like. All of these are what normally the church does. And that's the way the church has expanded in Nigeria. And I'd like to say that the expansion of the church, especially in the middle belt part of Nigeria, is what is a threat now. But I'd like to say that it's not coincidental. It's not accidental. When in 2018, the 1st of January, were unfortunate to be attacked by the Fulani militia, they came out and claimed responsibility. So I'm not talking about what we're imagining. They said they were the ones who did it. They said the reason was because our cattle were rustled. They've come out of various fora to say that Nigeria is their God-given country and they are going to take it. So this is in the public domain. And just to give you a perspective, on the 12th of October 1960, this is very key to the things that are going on now. The Premier of Northern Nigeria himself, Fulani, made a statement that a new nation called Nigeria should be a state of our great-grandfather, Usman Dan Fodio. We must ruthlessly prevent the change of power. We use the minorities in the north as willing tools and the south as a conquered territory, and never allow them to rule over us, and never allow them to have control over their future. This statement is credited to the first Premier of Northern Nigeria, Sir Ahmadu Bello. He gave an interview on the 12th of October 1960. I'm saying this is a well-orchestrated arrangement that is going on. It's only now being emboldened because the current president, himself a Fulani, and a patron of the Ministerial, Ketan Hore, the militant group of the Fulani, the president is himself a patron, a grand patron of that body. And so there is an emboldening because they have power, they have authority now. So this is going on. This is evidenced by the fact that no arrests are made, no prosecutions are taking place, and there are official denials. When people are killed in their farms, there's a denial. Like you said correctly, they say it's a farmer's headers clash. There is no farmer's headers clash. There is an attempt to take somebody's land by force. Like I made a point before, why do you go to people when they're sleeping and kill them? Young children, women and old people. I know that cows do not eat flesh, human flesh. So it is something more sinister than meets the eye. And so it's important for, especially America, to know, like you said, an implosion of Nigeria is going to be a disaster to the whole global community. Because when you're talking about 200 million people being affected, today, as the lady said, she was staff to the governor of Benue State. We have about 180,000 IDPs, children, women in camps, displaced because the Fulani militia have come after them to take their land. They have had to leave their homes, their farms, and their vocations in order to find a refuge in IDP camps. So this is just at the micro level. This is going on in various states of the country. And so I think that it's important for us to know that it's not farmers' headers clash. Someone is going after somebody else's land and livelihood, and it's better understood like that. I think also that it's important for the policymakers and people in government in the US to understand that the narrative has to change from a farmers' headers clash to what it is, a land grabbing arrangement, going after people, killing them to take their land. This is what is going on. And also, it's important for, once the US government understands that, there are leaders, political leaders in Nigeria who are behind this. When President Trump made a statement 2018, when our president came, he said, you should stop the killing of Christians in your country or we'll do something about it. Let me report to this room that that singular statement was a total devastation because that created a lot of negative impact on the government. Such statements at that high level can create a lot of effect that will facilitate the change in attitude of those in authority, because this is fueled by people in authority. Finally, the people in government and policy in the US have to be properly educated and informed. Because right now, the information is not there. It's either deliberately so, or they are not properly informed. So I think it's important that they understand what this is. Finally, as a government in the United States will make a deliberate attempt to make Nigeria an ally, because what is going on at that level, if Nigeria becomes an ally, it's important because what America is known for, liberty, freedom, and all that, democracy, is important because then it will help the internal struggles that are going on. We are doing something as Nigerians which is not auspicious to say it here, but it's important that we know that America will not come and create a nation for us. We will have to fight to create a nation for us. Liberties are won, they are fought for and won, and we are working on that. So I want to just say that I appreciate this forum, and to say that those of you, the voices that are championing this cause, must never give up, because there's an end in sight, and people must be encouraged to speak against it. Those in government who are perpetrating this kind of evils must be stopped. They must be attacked. They must be told to know that the world knows what they are doing. if you refuse entry, or someone who is funding Boko Haram, is funding Maitela, definitely there will be an effect. So I want to thank you for this opportunity. Thank you very much.
Terwase, Orbunde. And shortly we'll be having questions, but first, Mr. Frank Gaffney Jr., CEO of Save the Persecuted Christians. And also Assistant Secretary of Defense for International Security Policy during the Reagan administration, and he was the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Nuclear Forms and Arms Control Policy. We're very happy to have you here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm honored to be on this panel with people who are putting a lot of energy and, in some cases, I think their lives on the line to tell the truth about what's happening in Nigeria. Let me build on what has been said by my distinguished colleagues. I believe that what is afoot here is jihad. It is a concerted, systematic, organized, and increasingly genocidal effort to remove from Nigeria, and most especially from the areas of Nigeria that are resource rich, Christians who are, by definition, under this Sharia supremacist program that drives jihad. Enemies of Islam and people that can be eliminated or otherwise removed at will. And this creates not just a very strong contradiction to the party line. The party line, I'm afraid, is not confined to the government of Nigeria. It is also the party line of significant parts of our own government here in the United States, namely, that as has been said, this is just farmers and herdsmen who can't get along. And they're somehow mutually responsible for the bloodletting that seems to be virtually, if not entirely, confined to the farmers. How does that work? Well, it works if, in fact, it is jihad. And the herdsmen, the Fulani militants primarily, are armed to the teeth, as well as doctrinally, religiously, if you will, but I think of it more as ideologically driven to engage in this religious, ethnic cleansing of those who are not with the Sharia. Our challenge, it seems to me, is to be truthful about that reality. I'm very pleased to be co-sponsoring with this team this particular event, but we also had the privilege of working with specifically the International Committee on Nigeria a few weeks ago, and sponsored a delegation from Nigeria. We called it the Nigeria Crisis Delegation. And had the opportunity to introduce some extraordinarily brave men and women who, again, had come here to tell the truth, to bear witness to what they had personally experienced in some cases and what they had seen in their communities in the way of this kind of genocidal effort to remove Christians from their lands. They were vilified by the government of Nigeria, even by the vice president of Nigeria, who was invited to what I call a come to Jesus meeting with our own vice president, Mike Pence, after his chief of staff and others on his staff heard from the Nigeria Crisis Delegation. And after that meeting between the two vice presidents, The embassy spokesman for Nigeria once again vilified those who were truth-telling about what's going on in their country. So it brings us to what do we do about this? The Congressman has identified, former Congressman, just for the record, he didn't start serving in 1918. 1981. It was a long time, but it wasn't quite that long. I'm sure it felt those days like it was about that long. But he served with great distinction, of course, and he has been a tremendous leader on all of these issues, both in and out of government. And what he has said is so true, that there does need to be findings of fact, specifically that genocide is taking place. And genocidal activity building to full-on genocide is taking place in other places. Not just at the hands of the Fulani, but of course at Boko Haram, as well as the Islamic State in the West Africa province. That would be the Islamic State that we think we have defeated, at least some do, in the Middle East. That will be the Islamic State that we hoped to deprive of their caliphate in Iraq and Syria. And that would be the Islamic State that, together with Boko Haram and together with the Fulani, joined as they are by this shared commitment to imposing Sharia on the entirety of Nigeria, and for that matter, I believe, the Lake Chad region beyond. They are seeking to reestablish a caliphate on a vastly grander scale and with considerably greater money and therefore power than ever would have been possible in the parts that they occupied in Iraq and Syria. So think about that. It's not just the nightmare of possibly tens of millions of Christians being driven from the country into these refugee flows with ripple effects for Africa, for Europe, almost certainly for this country and beyond. It is that what will be filling the vacuum that's thus created will be the jihad of the Islamic State. And I think it's fair to expect that it won't be confined to Nigeria or even the Lake Chad region. It will be spreading throughout West Africa and far beyond. So what do we do about it very quickly and very superficially, perhaps? We believe at Save Persecuted Christians that it is incumbent upon all of us to hold the persecutors accountable for what they're doing. And more to the point, to create costs to them for their crimes against humanity. President Trump, to his credit, took this basic proposition out for a test drive not so long ago. Last year, he called to account the regime of Recep Tayyip Erdogan for the persecution of one specific Christian, an American Christian, a missionary by the name of Pastor Andrew Brunson in Turkey. He not only held him accountable, but when Erdogan refused to release Pastor Brunson, to impose some very punishing sanctions on the steel and aluminum industries in particular of Turkey, the effects of which are still being felt in that country, by the way, even though Pastor Brunson, thank God, is now out. In fact, I had a chance to visit with him briefly this weekend in Denver, Colorado, where he spoke very powerfully about the need to hold the persecutors accountable, as was done with great effect in his case, but now needs to be done on a far larger scale to stave off this disaster in Nigeria. Let me close by saying that in addition to holding the persecutors accountable, we should also be holding those who enable the persecutors accountable. I happen to be wearing a pin, there's some outside if anyone would like one, that features prominently the letters SPB. On the pin it stands for Stop Persecuting Believers. It's also the acronym for one of the most prominent law firms and lobbying operations in this city, Squire Patton Boggs. We have made it our purpose in the Save the Persecuted Christians initiative to use this upcoming ministerial, on whose margins we're meeting today, as an opportunity to raise the visibility of what Squire Patton Boggs is doing on behalf, not of Nigeria, fortunately, but alas, Communist China, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Cameroon, in the Lake Chad region, I believe, and the Palestinian Authority. Lobbying on their behalf to protect them from accountability, to get benefits from the American taxpayer, and otherwise to prosper even as they engage each and every one of those regimes in systemic, state-sponsored persecution of Christians and usually other faith minorities as well. They are not alone, to be sure, in such representation. They just happen to be particularly egregious in doing it. And last week, Save the Persecuted Christians and a coalition of 44 other groups came forth to tell Squire Patton Boggs to cease and desist with this enabling of persecution. We encourage you to join us.
Thank you. Since time is quite tight and we only have former Congressman Wolf here this first half, we'd like to open up for questions. So if you have any questions for our panelists, please raise your hand and also present yourselves, and we'll come around with a microphone.
No, thank you. My name is Imam Shafi Karim. I'm from Nigeria. I'm from the Strength in Diversity Development Center, and also the Imam of the Islamic Platform Center of Nigeria. I would like to thank the organizers of this side event and speakers, and I would like to commend you greatly. I have a question, but before that, I just want to make a poser that to put things in proper perspective, because we are also equally on ground. And I want us to know that the Fulanese you're talking about do not represent Islam or the Muslims. I also want you to understand. Yeah, I also want you to understand. I can speak for everyone. I also want you to understand that it is not possible. It is not possible for the Fulanese to institute Sharia in Nigeria, because Nigeria is not an Islamic state, and we have a constitution, and it's not Quran. If you are talking about issues of lands, I agree with you, like the Honorable Terwase has just said, that we have issues of land. And because of the fact that these people are equally ignorant of Islam, you can't trek from the up north down to the middle belt and you want to claim people's land. Time immemorial, we know we have issues of farmers and others, herdsmen intruding on farms, even in the south. I had a cause just to share this. When the car and there was a...
So, could you get, I'm sorry to
Okay,
interrupt.
sorry.
So just your
What
question
want,
and
my
then,
question is
and who you
because
like
I have
to
a lot
address.
to bear, but because of time,
Yeah,
we
I'm sorry, yeah.
because we do not have the opportunity to make these statements. It is really giving what I call misrepresentation of certain issues. But my question is this: how do we join forces together as religious institutions and organizations? Bearing in our mind that Islam or Christianity, we are from the same Abrahamic religion and the Jewish. How do we come to fight these common enemies, to me, which I believe is the leadership of the political class, that are really fueling all this and making things difficult for us? Thank you.
So, who would like to start? And just short, yeah, brief.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for your expression of solidarity with the victims of these attacks. I must tell you that my reading of Islam, I'm sure it's not as learned as yours, but that regrettably, those who claim to be acting in the name of Islam pursuant to the Sharia have the better argument than do those who claim that they are acting outside of Islam, according to the text of Islam itself, according to the code of Sharia. But whether that's right or whether that's wrong, they are acting to achieve the dominance of Sharia in your country. And I think that's a very serious problem for your country as well as for the rest.
Because that is even against Islam, to impose your religion on other people. It's even against the tenet of Islam.
Let me thank my brother for what he has said, but don't forget that at least 8 states under President Obasanjo adopted Sharia. Don't forget that.
Yeah.
And he, as a president, he said it was politically driven. So the fact is that there was an attempt at various times to officially adopt Sharia as a code of law. But your question is, how do we come together to fight it? Let me say that not every Islamic scholar is behind what is going on. It's not. In my state, although we're about 99% Christian, we have Muslims living with us, and they are at liberty to live with us. So the point is, every well-meaning person, every human being, will never be party to the killing of innocent people, children, women, and the aged. So it must be condemned. You will join us to condemn it. If, for instance, the president rose up and condemned such actions, if people were persecuted, if people were arrested, you will find that it will no longer be popular. It will not be good business for anybody doing that, but that is absent. That is what is creating the problem. Therefore, in order for us to have a common ground, let both sides come out and condemn what is criminal, what is inhuman at all levels.
A special envoy would help everyone. A special envoy, when a special envoy was appointed by President Bush, it helped everybody in Sudan. The North-South, it brought everyone together. So hunger, famine, sexual trafficking, corruption, whatever the case. So a special envoy would help not only Nigeria, but all the countries in the Lake Chad region. Secondly, in order to get the attention of the political leadership, you literally need to make the case, I go back to what I said, that this is genocide, particularly with regard to Boko Haram, and the world missed it in Rwanda, the world missed it in Darfur, the world missed it in Srebrenica, the world missed it, and we're going to miss it again, and if we miss it again, many, many will die. Therefore, you need to make the case from the legal. On the issue of the Nineveh Plains and in Iraq, there were legal opinions put together so that the political leadership could grab onto, because there are some in the State Department that you mentioned this don't want to deal with it. So if you had a legal opinion by a prominent person to make the legal case, because it is clearly with regard to Boko Haram, then you move the political process. But a special envoy would help Christian, Muslim, animalists, would help everybody and anybody. There's no controversy. There should be no controversy surrounding what do you do. The question is, how do you get to what do you do?
Thank you very much. And there was a question in the back, the lady in the back. And then we'll come to you.
Hi, Cheryl Blunt.
Yes, there's a, you can speak, I hear you, but we'll use the microphone.
Cheryl Blunt, I'm a freelance journalist. Who is arming the Fulani herdsmen?
Well, I'll quote the president of Nigeria, Muhammadu Buhari, who said, these people come from Libya, these people come from outside the country. I'm quoting him. An AK-47 is a very expensive weapon. So definitely, it is not the man who sells his cows that goes to buy them. Somebody is definitely arming them. And because not one, it's not two, it's not 10, it means that so much money is going into it. I won't say this is the person doing it, but I know that the person doing it is organized, is well funded, is well focused, and is sponsoring what they believe there is profit in it. So I'm afraid I will not say this is the person doing it, but I can tell you that it is well orchestrated because it's expensive.
Let me cover it, that when we were there in the trip, the attack on the village of Agatu took place, and they came in helicopters. And they also had motorized boats, so who knows? Secondly, I think the media, no criticism of any media here, the media has failed to really deal with this issue. It used to be, you remember CNN when any crisis took place, Christiane Amanpour went there. It was almost like if she went there, you know, there was a problem. The media, the Washington Post doesn't cover this. The New York Times, to its credit, does a little bit better, but the media is not covering it. So, but back to Agatu, you come in with helicopters, motorized boats, there's a lot of support coming from.
I've been told that the attacks, I think our crisis delegation made this point several times in the course of their discussions with both executive branch leaders and congressional leaders and media, the Heritage Foundation. Frequently, if not invariably, there would be helicopters that were seen to be dropping arms in proximity to where the attacks would subsequently take place. Now again, this isn't just happening, and this isn't just herdsmen. This isn't even just Boko Haram. This is being fed either by the government itself in a complicit way or turning a blind eye to it and coming from outside of the country almost certainly. But again, I concur completely with the Congressman. A special envoy is needed to get to the ground truth of what's happening there and to mobilize the government of the United States behind coherent, concerted action based on that ground truth.
Final question. Sir, would you introduce yourself?
My name is George Parker with Revealing Life Ministries, and it's more of an observation than it is a question. I attended a church, local church, that has 60 countries represented, and far and away Nigerians are the most represented in our congregation. And this is a small sample size, and this is one man's opinion, but I've had this discussion with most of the Nigerians in our church. They all know what's going on. They all talk about it amongst themselves. They all feel they have no opportunity to do anything, that they don't have a voice to make a difference as to what's going on. So they just stand back. This is one church. I'm sure it's probably an issue throughout the Nigerian, I'm not speaking for the Nigerian diaspora, but I am afraid it's probably an issue that many Nigerians here don't feel that they have a voice, that they can't do anything to make a difference, although they are all fairly aware of what's going on. So I think that's the issue, is how to bring the American Nigerian diaspora behind the efforts as well. Thank you.
Yeah, they could. The diaspora for the Nigeria has roughly 380 to 400,000. The diaspora in Texas is roughly 80,000. Are you telling me that 80,000 people going to the office of Senator Cruz couldn't have an impact? Senator Cruz is a very good guy. Are you telling me that 80,000 people, or 60,000, or 40,000, or 30,000, or 20,000 wouldn't have an impact with Senator Cornyn? Senator Cornyn is a good person. Are they meeting with Senator Cornyn? The diaspora down in Atlanta is 9, 10, 15, some tell me many more. Are they telling me that they can't meet with Senator Isaacson, who's a good guy? The diaspora in Maryland is large. Are you telling me Ben Cardin, who is a good guy, the ranking Democrat on the Foreign Affairs Committee, are you telling me that a 20,000 diaspora from Montgomery County and Prince George's County wanted to meet with Senator Cardin? He wanted to meet with him? They do have the ability. So I think, the diaspora has the opportunity. Have they been in to see Senator Cruz? Have they been in to see Senator Cornyn? Have they been in to see Johnny Isaacson? Have they been in to see Senator Perdue? Have they been in to see Senator Cardin? And they're all good guys, Republican and Democrat. So the diaspora really has more power and ability to do than, so sometimes it can be.
But they need to know that.
Well,
somebody needs to lead them into.
let me tell you, you just call CA 43121, ask for the office of Senator Cornyn, Senator Cruz, and say, we're the diaspora in how many, I don't want to state because I hear there's a large number down in the Houston area. When Senator Cruz lives in Houston, when he goes home this weekend, or when he goes, so they have the ability, and it's just difficult. CA 43121, ask the operator, I like the office of Senator Cruz. I like the office of Senator Cornyn. I like the office of Senator Cardin. I like the office of Senator Perdue. I like the office of Senator Isaac. They have the ability, and all five, Republican and Democrat, I believe would embrace this issue. Partially is, they're not hearing from the diaspora, and with all deference, the Washington Post and the main media just isn't covering it. For some reason, many of the networks have cut back on their foreign correspondents. I'm not criticizing. They're just not there. I think they cover Nigeria from Nairobi. That's what they cover in Chicago from LA. It doesn't work. The diaspora has within them, and the closest we're coming. You need to make the case in a legal argument so that the world can't say it's not so, that this is genocide, particularly by Boko Haram, and then you need to take that argument and you need to engage the prominent religious leaders of all different denominations here in the United States. I mean, Jesus talks about this in Luke 4. I saw the oppression. Read Hebrews, read Ecclesiastes 4:1. So they're all the biblical basis, but in fairness to the leadership of the Christian community and the other denominations here, they may not even know what's going on because nobody in the media is telling them. But if you could get some of the prominent of all the denominations, all the what's taking place in the Catholic Church is unacceptable. What's taking place in the Protestant Church is unacceptable. What's taking place in the Chabad girls from the Bishop Kwashi? Why are all these churches? They would, so maybe they don't know, so it's the opportunity and the obligation to let them know, and they're all good people, and I believe they will engage, and they will do this, and I believe the administration will act, and I think this problem can be solved. But the diaspora, there's much they can do.
Let me just say one thing. I said that there must be an internal Nigerian solution. That internal Nigerian solution will go a long way to galvanize the diaspora. The reason is because American independence was fought by Americans. You had a cause. You sacrificed your lives. Nigeria is not going to be built by anybody else. So while we are walking on the ground, of course, it will be long before we get to talk to the diaspora. They must see what is going on at home, because the message has not been, the platform has not been well laid out. That's what we're working on now. A national platform that will cut across tribes, will cut across sections, and we understand the eternal purpose for which Nigeria was put together by God. Once that is established at home, and I trust it's going to be soon, we have to come to America and talk to the diaspora. But while it's difficult now is because Nigeria is big, and different people are being driven by different things. You find out that someone goes into a meeting, his tribe becomes his main issue. He's attending his private meetings, he's attending his community meetings, hasn't seen that the nation is in danger yet, but it won't be long before we make that statement here in America.
Yes.
One quick word. I think another concern that I've sensed is that there are people within the diaspora community who are on different sides in this struggle. And some are quite happy with the party line and promoting it, and it makes it more difficult to hear from those who are trying to present the truth and have corrective action. And I can just tell you, having sat through a number of these meetings with the Nigeria Crisis Delegation, there's goodwill, as Congressman Wolf said, there is goodwill on the part of our elected leaders, most especially the Trump administration. But they are handicapped by this confusion about the nature of the trauma. And that has to be cut through, and I think the diaspora community that is willing to tell the truth is definitely part of that solution.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your statements. Thank you for your questions. Unfortunately, we couldn't take as many as we would like, and it is a wealth of information here, so I don't know if you'll be around, people can approach you. We're going to start the second panel very shortly in around 3 minutes. So take some refreshments, and then we'll thank you very much.